Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Day-to-Day Live. Day off, and I still can't get my words out. Going very well, this. Matt Furness and Graham Bell here. Thank you very much for joining us on our YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter accounts. And, of course, those of you listening on the podcast as well. I really do appreciate all of you taking your time out to come and join us. We've got a lot to get through today, Matt. So I don't think we should mess around any further. Don't forget to play the Opta Challenge, of course. That's on theanalyst.com. But we'll dive into that a little bit more because I think we need to look back at Portugal's absolutely outstanding performance yesterday at times, already through to the last 16, not the quarterfinals, Serie A England. And it's a very good moment to welcome Aaron Barton onto our show, as ever, one of our great writers that we have over on the Opta Analyst to really break this one down. So, pleasing result last night.
Very pleasing. I think I've got a bigger smile on my face than compared to when I was first on, when I was full of apprehension and nerves and anxiety. Yeah, it was just I thought it was a professional performance. They had to sort of ride the luck at times and get a little bit of luck at the other end of the pitch as well. And as you say, Portugal have qualified for the round of 16, the first time they've won the opening two games of a group stage in the World Cup since 2006, which is something in itself after couple of disappointments in the last few tournaments. So yeah, full of positivity, full of optimism, not too focused on the negative aspects of the performance, but more so the Portugal are through. That's the main thing, and hopefully they can make it 3 out of 3 and top the group.
You talk about there, you're one of only a handful of teams to have won both your games so far. Only Brazil and France have done so as well. In the last two World Cups, we saw 7 teams in both tournaments win the first 2 games. How much do you think that's down to the overall quality of teams in this tournament actually being better, the bar's being raised, or do you think it's down to like timing during the season as well, or do you think it's just a weird quirk on that one?
To be honest, it could be a bit of both. I think when you're looking at lots of people have been talking about it, maybe a decrease in quality in the top teams, and the fact that a lot of these top international sides have got noticeable weaknesses that the sort of weaker teams can then exploit. But then I think you've also got to give credit to the shocks that have happened in the tournament. The fact that these lower ranked nations are able to go out and pull off these shocks, which then causes these teams to not be able to go on and win 2 and 3 games in the group.
You talk about that one. Mauricio Pochettino on BBC, I think it was yesterday or the day before one of the games, was talking about preparation ahead of the tournament. So normally you'd have 4 or 5 weeks with your team. Someone like Argentina may have only had 7 to 10 days ahead of that. So that allows teams like maybe Saudi Arabia, who were spent a month together before the tournament, they broke the Saudi Pro League up, to actually get really organised, devise a strategy to make it as hard as possible for those teams. And it paid off for them, didn't it, in that game?
Yeah, I mean, the longer you're together as a group, obviously there's the stuff that you're working on the training pitch, but then it's also just being together as a group, video analysis, studying teams, studying weaknesses. You aren't just coming off the back of getting your head filled by your club with opposition analysis and stuff for what's going on in your domestic league. You then go into the World Cup, and as you say, 7-8 days later, and Portugal played a match against Nigeria, and 4 or 5 days later, we're in the World Cup. So you do feel like you've got less time to prepare. I mean, whether they've been handed out sort of assignments while they've been on club duty to get up to speed, I'm not too sure. I'm not in the know on that, but I definitely think it is a bit of a difference, this World Cup being at the time that it's on, that it's a lack of preparation. And then, as you say, the teams that are able to maybe prepare for a little bit longer have reaped the benefits.
Back to Portugal and last night's match winner. Last time we talked before the tournament, we talked about Bruno Fernandes and how his build-up this year so far for Portugal, he's been quite a strong player for them. Added 2 more goals last night. 1 if you're Cristiano Ronaldo, but yeah, 2 if you're everyone else. That's 7 goals in 11 appearances this year for Bruno Fernandes. His previous best year was 4 in a calendar year. The next highest scorer for Portugal this year is Ronaldo on 3. So Fernandes, his impact in that team has been pretty impressive this year, hasn't it? And do you think that he is the match winner in that side now?
Yeah, I think he's definitely established himself as that. I think when we last spoke, spoke about perhaps how he was perceived back in Portugal as well. Whenever he sort of pulled on a Portugal shirt, he never seemed to be able to find that sort of high gear that he was at Sporting, and then obviously at Man United. And there was times where he was in and out the side. He wasn't starting in big games, and perhaps at times too much of a risk taker for Fernando Santos. And then also the fact that it felt like he was trying too hard when he was on the pitch. It was all a bit hero ball at the time. At times, it was all a bit like, I need to prove myself. Recently, since before the playoff, because he was instrumental in getting Portugal to the World Cup in that game against North Macedonia, scored both goals. And then the games sort of since the game against Nigeria again, scored twice, I think. He's just been getting a lot more sort of involved and a lot more. He looks a lot more at home in the team. It doesn't look like he's overawed at all. It's sort of like he's comfortable with becoming this sort of talisman. And obviously, the elephant in the room is always going to be, you've got Ronaldo on the pitch, and the conversation between sort of them two when they were at Man United together. Obviously, Ronaldo's now left. In terms of Fernandez's performances have dipped since Ronaldo's arrived there, sort of statistically. That has been a big one, I think, for him to overcome. But he definitely looks a lot more at home. He was trying to make things happen last night for Portugal. He was driving them up the pitch. Some of his long passing in the World Cup so far, both in the game against Ghana and last night, has been superb in terms of switching the play up, switching the flanks, playing those diagonals in over the top for the likes of João Felix and Ronaldo to run onto. It really gives Portugal another dimension with his passing range. And then obviously he was on hand to convert the late penalty as well and sew up the victory.
A penalty that never was. It was obviously the worry that a lot of people have for this Portuguese side is that it's centred so much around Cristiano Ronaldo and his personal quest for more World Cup goals. I mean, he's on 8 now, 1 behind Eusebio for all-time top scorers in World Cup history for Portugal. He didn't get that goal last night, and it doesn't look like he's going to get it. Seeing from Adidas have released data today saying that there was no touch on the ball. It's like cricket, the snippet sort of thing, isn't it? It was, it was. I think the worry from externally, from people that aren't in Portugal or Portuguese fans, is that there's too much centred around Ronaldo, and actually that can hold back this Portuguese side. It's a stronger side with better players overall than that Euro 2016 team that won the tournament. So it shouldn't really be like that anymore, should it? It's not all about Ronaldo. He isn't. Okay, I'm not going to say he's not the best player in that team, because on paper it's hard to argue historically that he isn't. But there are world superstars in that side now, a lot more of them than used to be.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think a lot of the outside noise has sort of made the team a lot more like not as harmonious as it actually is, because all the noise that comes out of the Portugal camp is that they're a very together group. They're playing as a collective. There's good banter amongst sort of the players, and it doesn't seem to really be that problem. Every player that came out and spoke in the media has obviously spoken about Ronaldo, but that they are also, a collective unit. And we've saw so far in this World Cup that Ronaldo's coming off the pitch as well. He's not playing the full 100 minutes in some World Cup games. I think last night he came off around the 80-minute mark, so obviously missed, and then the penalty in the added time and stuff. And he's just on the bench, and he's happy to cheer the side on. And obviously, he's a player that wants to be on the pitch. But I think Fernando Santos knows that he can't stay on the pitch for the entirety of the game, or knows that when it's time, Ronaldo will be happy to come off the pitch. And I do think it's something that the international media and like the English media as sort of, they make it seem a lot worse than what it actually is. And obviously Portugal do play to Ronaldo.
It's an easy story, isn't it?
It is. And it's a player who made his name in England. It's a player who has got ties to England, obviously, throughout his career. A lot of the controversy in his career has been when he's playing in England or playing against England, or coming out and having jabs against former England players, and it all sort of seems to fuel up the sort of fire in the English media. But Portugal, yeah, they do play to Ronaldo at times, but they haven't as much in this World Cup. I think in the first game against Ghana, they weren't just pumping balls in the box. They were trying to play sort of through the lines. They were trying to get the likes of Bernardo Silva, Joao Felix on the ball, and Ronaldo would sort of drop deep, put a couple of touches in, and then sort of move back to the box. And they might not have really performed excellently so far at the tournament, but it doesn't strike me as a team that is putting all of its energy into Ronaldo, despite what people had want you to think. I mean, last night it certainly wasn't. It was more attempts at trying to sort of interplay. You know, they had lots of possession. I think 70% in the first half. The only real issue is that they didn't create enough quality chances, and that Uruguay actually had the best chance in that first half. But I do think that this is a team that is comfortable with the talent that it's got amongst its ranks. And Ronaldo isn't just another player. It's Cristiano Ronaldo, obviously. But there definitely seems to be an understanding between the players and Cristiano himself of what will benefit the team better. And Cristiano's obviously going to chase the records, because that's the type of player he is. I mean, he came out and said, you know, I don't chase the records chase me. Well, that's not true, because he does chase records, because that's what's put him at the top level throughout his entire career, is that he's always on to the next. He's on to the next. Okay, you know, you score 500 goals, now he wants 600. He scored 700, he wants 800. Sort of, that's the player he is. But as long
the
as
problem he's got is that every time he hits a new landmark, Pele just adds on 5 more goals from a Brazilian Sunday League team.
In his back garden.
He'll never beat that. Yeah. Well, we talk about Portugal there overcoming some really difficult hurdles. Uruguay and Ghana, 2 teams that are strong, and you overcame those, albeit a little bit luckier in the first game after what happened in injury time. We're adding another guest in here, Areku, our Ghanaian superstar, super fan. How happy are you after yesterday?
It was incredible. I can't describe the last 10 minutes. I don't want to experience that again. That's the best thing I can say. It was a real happy moment, you know, like people could barely watch.
It was a must-win game, really, wasn't it, ahead of that final group game against Uruguay, which we'll come on to later. You can see there the momentum graphic we've got. Injury time, completely dominant by Korea. But actually, throughout the game, there wasn't a massive swing of momentum for Ghana, apart from that period where they got the 2 goals in the first half. A lot of it was really fast, counter-attacking football that was quite impressive on the eye, actually. South Korea did bombard you with crosses a lot. They had 15 successful crosses in that match, which is actually a World Cup record since 1966. 35. It was a David Moyes-style performance when he was at Man United, for flying those crosses in. It was a plan that worked for 2 of their goals, but other than that, Ghana dealt pretty well with that, didn't they, at the back?
Yeah, I would say it's a bit surprising, because it wasn't strange to see them trying to attack us using their width. You know, during the press conference, one of the midfielders did say that if Ghana had a weakness, it would be through our laterals, and that's what they're going to try and do during the game. And so, after I saw the lineup and I realized that, you know, Toado had made changes to his fullbacks, brought in Tariq Lamptey to replace Ali Seidu and then Gideon Mensah for Babaraman, the assumption was that he knew what was coming and probably thought these guys would be more aggressive in terms of trying to close down these spaces and stop the crosses. But all he didn't know was the 2v1s that were coming, and, you know, those midfield runs into wide areas that really troubled Ghana. And unfortunately, we couldn't deal with a couple of them, which I thought that it just highlights a problem that we have in the team. We may not have been punished, you know, yesterday, but heading into the game against Uruguay, that's maybe one thing that we have to probably think about. If you look at the game against Portugal, we conceded 2 goals in a space of like 5 minutes. And then against Korea, within the space of 3 minutes, we considered 2 very, very similar. And so it highlights, you know, I think it's sometimes lack of leadership, lack of concentration. And those are some of the issues that I think the team has to fix. But apart from that, positive result, a lot of good things to take, especially that second goal with how the team worked out.
Earlier this year, you did a great article for us on Mohamed Kudus, highlighting how well he's doing at Ajax, and how big a star he could be for Ghana. Yesterday, He showed that promise in the World Cup with 2 goals, the first of which came after a move with 31 passes. That's the longest goal move for a World Cup goal by Ghana ever. Jordan Ayew played a key part in those 2 goals, the first 2 goals, sorry, for Ghana. This goal, a lovely ball into the box. There was there's been a bit of criticism, hasn't there, about Jordan Ayew and the position he fills. I remember we talked about it last time as well. His role in that team's sometimes a bit confusing, but yesterday he really showed what he can bring to that side, didn't he?
Yeah, after the game, his brother Andrea, reminded us all of how good Jordan can be. He says that people just sometimes just love to talk bad about his brother, but he knows how quality he can be, and I think he showed that yesterday. The worry is that how consistent can he do this? Like, how can he do this in the next game? Because Jordan always has a couple of good moments, and then after that, it seems like a bit flat in terms of his performances. So the real challenge to him is carrying this across to the next game. But I think it was a really brilliant performance. His unique trait is slowing down the game and winning fouls, and attracting opponents. And we saw that being delivered to perfection, adding some bit of end product to his game yesterday. And so I think that he had a fantastic game. We'll probably start again against Uruguay based on merit and what he achieved in that game. For Mohamed Kudus, I think he's just growing in to become that superstar that we all expected him to be. Maybe he's ahead of the curve, but I do believe that the start that he had to the season at Ajax has sort of catapulted his confidence and the self-belief that he has. And we've seen that translate into the World Cup so far, where he wants to take more responsibility and is popping up in the right places. And everything seems to be falling into place for him at the moment.
So with Ghana obviously having this final group game against Uruguay and having the youngest squad at the World Cup, we talked about the need for experienced heads in that team to be able to keep Ghana focused on that match. It could descend into a bit of chaos. Uruguay have obviously the king of chaos, Darwin Nunez, up top. It's one of those games. Are you worried about that the game itself will be it's obviously going to be publicised as a revenge match for what happened last time. Do you worry that can get inside the heads of some of the Ghanaian players and almost the importance of the match might be too much for them?
Well, I was speaking to a couple of ex-players, and all of them seem to say the obvious, that maybe the team shouldn't focus too much on revenge and try and just take it as another game. The most important thing is to qualify. But look, no matter what we all say here and say, or what everyone says, the thing is, most of these players loved football 12 years ago and were probably young children. And me, for instance, I still remember exactly the point I stood when Suarez, blocked that shot and Jan's penalty hit the crossbar. And so it's a scar within me. It's something that I remember a lot. If you look at the whole 2010 years, probably one of the fondest memories that I do have. I don't remember anything else that happened in 2010. So a lot of these players would have that memory inscribed straight within their head. And no matter what you would say to them, they would go into that game wanting to prove a point. There would need to be some level of control to the intensity that they approach a game with. One, because we have about four players on yellow cards. And if they do end up getting any sort of ball, they could potentially miss the round of 16. So it's up to the technical team and the coach to ensure that the game is controlled and we do have possession, because once we end up conceding and having to score and Uruguay trying to frustrate you and all that, and time running out, that's where the emotions tend to boil. So we would need a lot of control. I think that the best form of having control is to make sure that we possess the ball. That way we're comfortable and we know that everything is within our own hands and we have our destiny.
So I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong in saying this. If you finish second in that group, you will probably play, or you will play Brazil, won't you? So the last thing you want is some of your players suspended for that match. So yeah. So we've got here our predictions, our predictor models. What they think will happen. Sorry, that's the favourites of the tournament. The group predictor for group Portugal's and Ghana's group. I think we have that. If not, I'll bring it up now. So we've got Portugal. Obviously, they're through already. 97.94% 50% chance of getting through as winners of the group. We then have Ghana just behind Uruguay in our predicted chance of getting to the next round, but it's splitting hairs. 46.4% for Uruguay and 43.7% for Ghana. So it's going to be a close call, whatever. I know what you think is going to happen, Areku, and I know what you want is going to happen. Aaron, what do you think is going to happen in that final group game between Uruguay and Ghana?
I think Ghana will progress. I think Ghana will win the game. I think from watching the game,
has Areku threatened you?
No. you know what it is. I think just obviously watching the two games yesterday and watching the game against South Korea. Obviously, Ghana have got a little bit of naivety in the goals that they've conceded, but there's such energy. And you mentioned Mohamed Kudus there. That was a player that was linked to the club I support, Everton. We were apparently this close to signing him. Safe to say that ship has sailed now. And yeah, Uruguay yesterday, lots of fouls that went unpunished. There was a tackle from, I think it was Vecino on Ruben Neves. That was the most blatant yellow card that wasn't given. This is still a Uruguay team that will try and get away with those
They're
sorts
a very
of fouls
wily side, aren't they?
Yeah,
they know the dark arts.
The referee for the match will obviously be fully aware of sort of the history, and I think if Ghana can get on the ball and start to dictate proceedings and use that sort of youthful energy and exuberance that they've got and start to frustrate Uruguay, it can definitely play into the hands. But as you say, I think the worst thing would be to go 1-0 down and then have to change the game. That's when Uruguay come into their own, really, in terms of they're able to time waste, they're able to frustrate. But I honestly think Ghana will progress. Uruguay had a great chance in the first half yesterday, but you know they couldn't really do much sort of on the ball, and then Portugal they dominated possession.
I've been disappointed with Uruguay in this tournament so far.
I
was quite excited to watch them play. Admittedly, I haven't seen Suarez play for about a year, and it doesn't look like he's played for about a year the way he's playing. They've been disappointing. And Ghana, I obviously have a slightly biased view of Ghana with some friends that are Ghanaian, but I think they've really brought the energy to this World Cup, and they're one of the most exciting teams to watch. You don't really know what you're going to get from them. Yesterday, I certainly didn't expect that. I thought that it would be a lot cagier game than it was. It would be a lot tighter. They took the game to South Korea, and when they conceded those two goals in quick succession, I feared for them. I thought that's game over. I thought that they're a young side, not able to come back to us. The momentum is fully with South Korea. To then go and score that third goal, show the character needed to get through that game and win it as well. I was really impressed with them, and I hope they can win that next game against Uruguay.
Well, I actually think we would. It's always good to head into such a crunch game with the advantage of a draw being enough, and so it means that right from the first whistle, the advantage is Ghana. It's Uruguay who have to score. But then again, I think our players have to be emotionally intelligent and be ready for what's coming, because I know it will be difficult. But judging based on the evidence of things that we've seen so far, how we've seen both teams play Portugal and then South Korea, I think Ghana have looked much better on paper. The only issue is the defense. Conceding 5 goals in 2 games is unacceptable. And they're not numbers that usually pose for teams that qualify out of the group. And so that needs some fixing. So far, we've seen a back 5, which didn't work out too well. We've seen a back 4. I'm wondering whether we're going to get another surprise against Uruguay.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, both of you. And congratulations on another win for both your sides yesterday. Hopefully, we'll have some more joy in the next match day as well. So we'll get in touch and speak to you following those games, and I hope you enjoy the Uruguay game, Areku. It's going to be a tense one for you.
All right, thank you.
Cheers,
guys.
Cheers, guys. Always a pleasure to catch up with those guys, because you know what, insight that sometimes we just need as we go into these final games. Well, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Uruguay have been extremely disappointing at this World Cup so far, and I think...
But it won't matter if they can beat Ghana.
No, and
The thing is, I feel like this Uruguay team have a better chance against Brazil in the next round than Ghana would have.
Yeah.
I think they need that kind of like, I don't know, they've got that now. So they've been able to get through those games, haven't they? I know they haven't done it so far against Portugal and South Korea, but we've seen it before. They've got some quality. They've got a lot of quality on that side. They just haven't really displayed it yet. If it can come alive in that Ghana game, then who knows what will happen.
Well, exactly. Well, if we're talking about sides that are filled with talent, I think it's only fair we talk about our supercomputer favourites. We briefly brought this up earlier on, but let's just bring it up now. After 2 rounds of the match day here, we are staring at Brazil's chances of winning the World Cup, according to our supercomputer, increase incredibly. The only side with over a 20% chance, now the only side after last night with a 1 in 4 chance of winning the World Cup, according to our supercomputer, and a 38.29% chance of reaching the final. Looks like France, Spain, England, and Argentina also favoured for this one. I'd like to say joining us now is Augusto from one of our Latin American teams to really help us break this one down. You well, buddy?
Yeah, I'm fine. And you?
Well, probably not as good as you guys are at the moment because we're nervous about what on earth England are going to throw out on the pitch, which Matt and I will get to in a minute. But it seems like it's all positive at the moment.
Yeah, everybody here in Brazil is very optimistic with our chances, and I think we think that we have more than 1 in 4 chances of winning the World Cup. So everybody here is like it's 100% chance of winning, and even more because of those 2 games against very difficult opponents like Serbia and Switzerland. They were not easy, and Brazil managed to go through them without having faced a single shot on target. So everybody is with hopes very high here in Brazil.
Yeah, you talk about those first two games. We mentioned in the first, after the Serbia game, that we were really impressed with how Brazil got through that game. Serbia are a very difficult side to play against. We saw them cause problems for Cameroon yesterday as well, eventually not winning that match. But again, Switzerland, a very good side. They knocked France out of the European Championships in 2021. Brazil have made it, I mean, they haven't been free-flowing as what we've seen maybe past Brazil teams do. Yesterday, they were unfortunate having a goal disallowed from Vinicius Junior before Casemiro's goal coming off the backside of a Swiss player. But it was another really impressive performance. And we talk a lot about the Brazilian attacking flair they have. They have such a wealth of attacking talent on the bench. But so far, that Brazilian defence has been very impressive. We've almost forgot that Alisson is playing in these matches at times.
Yeah, that's is the impression here in Brazil also, that the defense is very well built, and even more with Casemiro in the midfield, he's playing very well. And yeah, the fear here was that since the elimination against Belgium in 2018, Brazil played 50 games before the World Cup, and just one of those was against a European side. It was a 3-1 win against the Czech Republic. But we didn't have the benchmark of how Brazil would play against a European side. And then against Serbia, no shots on target faced by Brazil. And then against Switzerland, again, no shots faced. So that fear of playing against European sides is over. Now we know that we can go ahead face-to-face with the most difficult opponents and play the defense so well like they're playing now. We know that like in the knockout stage, if you don't concede a goal, you have a very good chance of progressing to the next stage. So this is a very good news that the defense is very solid. And in the attack, we are feeling like it's missing something. It's missing, of course, now Neymar is missing, but in the first game, he was there and it was not so good like we expected, because with Vinicius Junior, Rafinha, Rodrigo, Anthony, Gabriel Jesus, Richarlison, and Neymar, everybody was expecting, oh my God, this Brazil is going to play all attack. It's going to be 4 or 5 goals per game. And we haven't seen that yet.
I think that might come in the next game.
Yeah.
So we've got you as a 99% chance of finishing top of the group. So it's pretty much nailed on that you are going to do that. That would mean you would face the second place team, which would likely be one of Uruguay or Ghana. What one would you rather face? I'm guessing it would be Ghana, Uruguay knowing Brazil a little bit better.
Yeah, Uruguay knows Brazil a little bit better, but in the last few games that Brazil played against Uruguay, Brazil didn't face too many difficulties. Like it in the last game, if I remember well, I think it was 4-1 for Brazil. So it was not a game that Brazil had any problem to win. Of course, World Cup is different from playing a World Cup qualifier, a Copa America, anything like that. But I don't know if between Ghana and Uruguay, Brazil has already played Ghana in the round of 16 in 2006 with Ronaldo scoring his last goal in World Cups. So it would be a good remembering. But I don't know. The fear here was facing Portugal. So Portugal, of
Yeah.
course, yesterday when Uruguay was playing Portugal, if Uruguay had scored the opener, we would probably face Portugal in the round of 16, and that was the biggest fear. But now, between Ghana and Uruguay, of course, the history between Brazil and Uruguay World Cup is not so good for Brazilians, but we've also won against them sometimes. But I don't know, there's no preference around here.
We talked earlier about the absence of Neymar in the last match, obviously being injured in the first game. There's thoughts that maybe his injury is a little bit worse than some are letting on and that he might not actually play again in this tournament. In qualification, he was your top goal scorer of 8 goals. But that Brazil side scored 40 goals. So there's 32 goals there coming from avenues other than Neymar. So is Neymar's importance in this Brazil side maybe overstated a little bit? Maybe down to his marketable sort of persona, and that actually people want to see him play. He's quite fun to watch. But actually, without him, you're just as strong.
Yeah, what we saw in the last 4 years before Qatar is that Brazil learned how to play without Neymar. So between Neymar debut with the national team and 2018, the elimination against Belgium, there was a Neymar dependency of the team. So the critics were always saying Neymar, Brazil depends too much on Neymar. And now in the last 4 years, we saw that he didn't play 40% of games. Of those 50 games, he didn't play 40%. So Brazil played a lot without him. We have Pretzi on doing that. And when we see his numbers, of course, he's the most important player Brazil has because he scored 18 goals and assisted 20 goals, like 14 more than other players have assisted. But when you see his goals, 12 of those have come from penalty. So he's more like a playmaker than the guy that defines the play. For that, we have Richarlison now that's playing very well in Brazil. So Richarlison plays better in Brazil than he plays in his clubs. And Neymar, of course, Brazil is going to miss him because he's the best player we have. But now we feel that we have alternatives. So in 2014, everybody remembers what happened when Neymar got injured. And I don't like to talk about that, but when Neymar got injured, it was like a national time of mourning, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, now everything is down." No,
and that was the issue, wasn't it? There was too much focus on the fact that he wasn't.
Yeah. That's what too much focus, and we didn't have a player that we could rely on to be like a substitute or to take the lead of the team. Like now we have Vinicius Junior playing very well, Richarlison. Casemiro is more on defense, but he's playing very well. We have the defenders that are very experienced in playing World Cups. So the team is more strong. It's not better without Neymar, but it's better than it was before without Neymar. And we saw that when Neymar got injured, the talks in Brazil were like, remember 1962 when Pelé got injured and Garrincha was the best player of the tournament. So, of course, Neymar is not Pelé and Vinicius Junior is not Garrincha. But we are expecting somebody to take the lead and be the guy from Brazil in this possible sixth World Cup.
Time for someone to step up. As a Watford fan, it's mad for me 4 years ago, I never would have thought a Watford striker would be leading the attack for Brazil in a World Cup. Might happen again in 4 years with João Pedro at Watford causing waves as well. So we'll see. But Brazil have been fantastic so far. We look forward to seeing how far they can progress in this tournament, and we look forward to chatting to you again. Hopefully, with Brazil's progression, we can chat again. Thank you very much for joining us today, Augusto.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers, Augusto. Thanks very much. I mean, the obligatory Watford mention on the podcast. Worth saying here, though.
I wanted to just make sure Augusto had heard of João Pedro.
Well, I'm there on that one. But, I mean,
Maybe people in Brazil don't care about him.
But we've also got to think the big news of yesterday: Reading versus Watford, FA Cup third round.
Yeah, that is the one that everyone will be watching.
The El Fernicico, I think they're calling it.
Yes.
Right then, I think it's only fair that we're going to spend a little 5 minutes now just chatting about England versus Wales tonight. Obviously, contrasting fortunes from England after the first game. That 6-2 victory over Iran, I think, built expectations up very highly. And the 0-0 draw against the United States sort of crushed them a little bit. But one thing that I found really interesting, you shared this out on the Opta Analyst Twitter account earlier on, was the playing styles of teams so far at this year's World Cup tournament. And I think this, the minute I saw this, I found this interesting because you can obviously see England, for those of you watching on YouTube, Twitch and Twitter, you can see England further along to the right-hand side, which means that they have more of a slow and intricate style of play in that bottom right. And immediately I turned around to you and I said, well, hang on here. Is there anything like that in terms of Premier League teams? Is there anything like, is this what England playing completely out of the ordinary for them, and they're sort of having to learn something new? And you said, well, it's kind of a bit Man City-ish.
Well, Man City are they're in that bottom right corner for the Premier League by quite some distance. And it makes you laugh that England play like that, but arguably our most creative player who plays for Manchester City, Phil Foden, isn't getting a look in. So, yeah, it'll be good to see him tonight. But, I mean, Spanish tiki-taka, what's English? Tippy-tappy? Someone put...
I tell you what,
I think that's probably...
If you've got suggestions, tweet them at Opta Analyst. We're all across our mentions at the moment. It's well worth the best one. You never know. We might adopt it as our phrase. You might be the new bounce back ability of 2022. Who knows on that front? So you reckon Foden plays tonight?
I don't reckon he plays. No, I'd like to see him play. But I don't know. Like, we're not through. It's not like... This is very similar. I say we, England. Sorry. It's very similar to the last Euros. We played well and beat Croatia 1-0 in the opening game. Okay, it wasn't similar to the Iran game in that we were free-flowing and scored so many goals. The second game was then a disappointment because we drew 0-0 with Scotland at Wembley. Scotland actually played better than us that day and could have arguably deserved to win, similar to the US game. We then won our third group stage game against the Czech Republic 1-0. Slightly different in that we'd already qualified before that game because the top three pretty much went through in all the groups. I mean, for us not to qualify tonight would be a monumental disaster on the scale of probably the worst we've ever seen by England. Don't we have to lose by 4 goals to Wales?
Yes, yeah, it's quite a shit.
Let's be realistic, probably isn't going to happen. I wouldn't put it past Wales beating us tonight. They'll be fired up for this one. I don't think it's a good Welsh side. I think it's in a transitional phase where they're still... It almost feels like they owe Bale and Ramsey World Cup appearances because of what they've done over time. Don't really disagree with that. But they've got some really good young talent coming through.
Yeah.
Brennan Johnson should be paying a lot more in this World Cup, for example.
And Bale at the moment, very much. I love the description of him as kind of a special teams player, and we're seeing that with just how fewer touches of the ball he's getting for that Welsh side at the moment. He really is out there. The trouble is, it's Gareth Bale. He will get these magical moments.
And he can still do something, that's the thing. You're always in the back of your mind, you'll think, he could pop in a free kick from 35 yards or just smack one in the top corner from open play. That will happen tonight, obviously. I think England, I know I said that, I thought they beat USA comfortably 3-0, I think I said. But I still think they can win comfortably tonight. I think they've got something to prove. And actually, that 0-0 against the USA will help them. It resets expectations a little bit. We all got a bit carried away after the Iran game because it was so impressive. We weren't used to seeing that kind of free-flowing attacking football from an England team in a tournament with so many good young players as well. I think it'll be interesting tonight to see if he plays Harry Kane because there's arguments of like, well, His ankles maybe got a little bit of a knock. We don't know too much there. But he hasn't scored yet. He needs a goal to build up his confidence. So do we risk possible injury for going further throughout the tournament to give Harry Kane some confidence ahead of the knockout stages when we don't even know if he will score tonight or play well? Or do we give someone like Marcus Rashford a chance? But I think it will probably... I mean, you've got arguments for both, haven't you? We were played so differently without Harry Kane. So what is that going to actually affect our preparation for a possible last 16 match against? It could be the Netherlands. Let's face it. We'll know by the time we play Wales tonight. There's a lot of questions to be answered tonight.
Yeah, it is strange. We're coming into this third game, and after game one, I think there were no questions about this England team, and now it's all the usual thoughts and feelings about this England team at World Cup tournaments coming out. And obviously Southgate's finding himself under quite a bit of pressure, I think, again. And
the big one for me is Kyle Walker. I think he needs minutes before he's our best right back against the top class player. If we were to play Brazil in the knockout stages, he is going to cope much better with players like Vinicius Junior or Mbappe for France than I think Kieran Trippier would. So I think he needs minutes now to enable him. You don't want him to be coming into a game like that without any game time.
But then I do wonder about Trippier. Like, I know that there is...
I thought he was dreadful against USA. I liked Trippier.
I thought he was poor.
He was a really good player, but I thought he was really poor. He was our poorest player.
And I'm trying to put this into words here. You could see at times Saka was getting frustrated that there was nothing up the outside of him. Saka was doing those little darts in.
But how much of that was down to Southgate? Because we saw that in the Scotland game as well. I remember being infuriated by Reece James in that game in the same position. Yeah. Because he wasn't going past the halfway line. Every time he would get near the halfway line or anywhere near the final third, he'd check back.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much of that was down to instruction from Southgate in the way they play or actually James not wanting the bomb on. My feeling is it was probably Southgate because we know Southgate...
But then you compare
he's not a negative manager, but
then you compare
safety first.
But then you compare that to Luke Shaw, who I think has been pretty decent on the left-hand side for England in getting forward and offering that outlet on the outside. I know there's talk today that Bellingham is going to get dropped and maybe you're going to see Henderson come into the team, which, look, I'll give Henderson his credit. He came in and he gave that little bit of energy and spark. Not necessarily creativity, but he gave that little bit of, well, come on, we're going to chase here, we're going to push here, we're going to move this ball. And I'm harsh on Bellingham because something just after the shackles came off game one, game two, the shackles went back on. And it's exactly like you called it. It's halfway through that England game, you turned around and said, this is Scotland, Euro 2020. This is just 4 points.
Just don't lose. That's what it was. Southgate, don't lose, yeah. It was make sure that you get into that final game in pole position.
Yeah,
and then that all depends on what happens tonight. After today, we could be going, it's a genius decision to be so negative against the US, secure a point, finish top of the group. I think US. I think Iran will beat US tonight.
I do as well.
This US side, I was really impressed with them against England more than I thought I would be. I just think it's too early for them. They've got some really good young players. I've said this about a few teams, but I actually think. In 4 years' time, they'll be a force to be reckoned with.
Well, I just look at all these teams that we've spoken about who've got these olden generation, and you talk about Wales there. It's one last go for those guys. You talk about Uruguay at the moment with Luis Suarez. It's one last go. It's one last go at the OK Corral for them. Belgium. There's too many teams with these. Costa Rica. There's too many teams with these older boys on the team who this is one last go. And it kind of, where does that leave them in 4 years' time? Compare that to the USA. They've got 4 years of building. They've got a World Cup on home soil. It's going to be a young squad. They're only going to add to that talent base as well. It could be fascinating where they're at compared to the likes of your Waleses, compared to your likes of, I'm not saying Uruguay because they have talent coming through anyway, but you might see a little bit of switch up in those teams who are joining the likes of the United States in the World Cup.
So I think England will win the group. I think they'll go through, and I think Iran will finish behind them.
Yeah,
I think Netherlands will win the group, but I'm not very scared of them as a team. I don't really mind who we play out of Senegal and Ecuador. No. I think both will be difficult opponents. I think I'd rather play Senegal.
Yes.
Ecuador, they played really well against Netherlands. I think those wing backs in their team offer a lot of threat to any team.
Yeah.
And I'd be more nervous, I think, playing against them than Senegal. Senegal look like they're missing Sadio Mane a lot in that attack.
There's a hole in that team,
Yeah, there is a hole in that team. They have many great players and also a threat, but not as big a threat as Ecuador, in my opinion.
No, I agree with you there. I mean, after all, in my Optimillion prediction, I had Qatar going through, so what do I know?
I had England going out.
So both of us are winning million. Though that's all about the Opta Challenge. The million, sorry, there is the Opta Challenge for. Oh my word, get your words out. It's been one day off. The Opta Challenge over on the analyst.com. We are going to run through the 3 questions that we have posed for the England game today against Wales. So let's see how this one rolls out. Question 1, as ever, for every game at the tournament, how will England versus Wales end? Not in a bloodbath in Tenerife, hopefully.
No chairs wrapped around heads. I think England will win 2-0 tonight.
I'm just going 1-0. I just feel like this is going to be too nervy, too frightening. I don't think Kane scores. I think it's someone else in the team. You know it's going to be something like a Foden scoring or something like that, just to really be like, hello, I'm just going to add to the narrative of this, if you don't mind it. We mentioned earlier on about Gareth Bale and how he had little impact in Wales' last game against Iran. So how many touches will Gareth Bale have in this game? The top of our slider for this one, I did check this one out, 50 plus maximum, which feels optimistic, but anyway.
Yeah, well, he's had under 40 in both his games so far. I think they'll have even less of the ball tonight. I reckon 32 tonight for Gareth Bale. That is obviously, there's no evidence or basis to that. It's just a number I've plucked from the sky.
Which is all how the best works on the Opta Challenge. I can see if this game slips away from Wales, he'll get subbed off with 20 minutes to go. And it will be a 10, 20 minutes. Say it's 3-0 or something like that. And it will be a, thanks, Gareth. There's your moment. And then Ramsey will follow about 5 minutes later. Well done, lads. Yeah. Good effort. Well done. I can just see that. So I'm curtailing myself. I reckon 28 today. I reckon it's quite a low amount of touches for Bale. He will be starved, and he's not played 3 games in how many ever days for quite a while. So, and finally, will England accumulate more or less than 1.5 overall expected goals in this game?
Yes. I think they'll have a penalty, so I think that will help. But I think they'll put on a decent performance tonight. I think that the players will be fired up for this one, obviously being against Wales. I don't think they'll come in underestimating Wales.
No,
like maybe previous editions of this England team may have done. And I think that they'll be looking to put on a good performance tonight. So I think they'll do it.
I hope they do. I'm going no. I still think this is cagey. I just don't think Wales are going to set up to try and leave Gareth Bale with one moment to make it a 1-0 or a 1-1 game. That's what I see. Maybe it'll open up as it moves on, but who knows? Right then, that's all for you over on theanalyst.com, where you can take on the Opta Challenge as well as read all our reviews and previews for each and every game at the World Cup and loads of other great content on top of that, including our interactive metrics and stats hubs that are well worth going into. For those who don't know, congratulations, Pete McKeever, the man who builds all this wonderful stuff for us. Worth mentioning that him and his partner have just had their second child, but it's really nice for him to, time his paternity leave for the middle of a World Cup. That's proper.
He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing.
Good man, but congratulations, Pete, and the family as well. Right then, from all us here, thanks very much for watching, whether you've been on Twitch, YouTube, or Twitter, or of course, if you have been listening to the podcast, really appreciate you joining us for this mammoth episode. We'll be back same time again tomorrow, hopefully either 12 or 1 GMT, depending on when we can get guests, as we will be for the rest of the week as we begin to roll on to the final stage of group stage matches, and of course, those all-important knockout games as well. But for now, on behalf of Matt and I and all our brilliant guests today, thanks very much for listening and watching, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.